I'm sorry to disappoint for everyone who is listening out there, but after more than 30 episodes up our belt, I'm afraid this might be our last one doing, at least for a while. If it's forever, we don't know. It's a mix of issues at hand, but we would just like to end this season or this series of BBFC v MPAA. It was a subject that has intrigued me a little bit, but probably not too many people are aware of. But it's important to discuss imitable behavior and dangerous behavior, or vice versa, with your usual host, Skinny E Media, and here, Bobotron or Rob Bavister.
Hello there.
I know it's a bit of a sad or kind of downbeat way to end sort of things, but this isn't, I hope this isn't in part because of the porno podcast we did last week, but it's probably may have had some part to play in it. But I'm just happy to move on to another topic like we can. So, as always, let's discuss about our first experiences with imitable and dangerous behavior. Now, in our definition, this can include playing with matches, suicide, solvent abuse, glue sniffing, or swallowing batteries, or any sort of behavior, making bombs, things you don't want to do in real life.
My experience with it. Well, it was hard for me to really comment on most of the imitable behaviour, seeing as that BBFC would have vigilantly cut any of that shit out from any films I could have watched during as a kid, even like in stuff that was aimed for more grown-ups. I mean, they would cut stuff out. I do remember watching a few PSAs about not playing with matches or staying off electric power grids and everything, which are always kind of silly and overblown. But that's, like I said, I mean, I don't have much to really. I haven't got a huge amount regarding this one, but I suppose that's my earliest foray into it. What about yours, Mark?
My favorite film of all time. I'll let you guess what it is. That's what got me into it.
Not Coraline, is it?
Oh, it's Toy Story, 1995.
Oh, crying out loud. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, oh, Christ, how did I forget? Ah, of course, yeah, because that movie was rated PG because of the scene where a kid plays with fireworks, even though it was only rated G in America. But that was unusual for back then.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if it was G, it would automatically be a U certificate. Most Disney films that had, I would say, stronger material, like Hunchback of Notre Dame and Black Cauldron, all got used, but Toy Story didn't, which always sort of made me scratch my eyebrow a little bit. But I was just happy to see it was an animated film and it was so colorful. That film makes me cry. And it's a bit tough to talk about that one without starting to tear up. But I know it particularly because of the PG rating as a result of watching Sid, the villain in it, playing with matches and torturing toys and rockets. Which, if you do that in real life, that's very dangerous and could be quite deadly. So I guess they were trying to be a bit on the cautious side, but in context of everything I just said, it was a bit unusual. So it is always interesting to talk about Toy Story to people because that in the UK it's a PG, but the 2, 3, and 4 your U certificates for an issue that on the surface probably doesn't mean much to outside censors, but in the UK we're trying to be a bit of a nanny state. So we can't have that. I mean, this is the same time. What was
I
that?
was saying it was kind of weird. Well, I was just saying because you say you bring up a nanny state stuff, but of course, at those sort of ratings, it was usually the other way around. I mean, something that got rated PG in America would get rated U here, or at least back then. Like, for instance, well, the following year, Space Jam came out, which of course PG in America and you in here, and so did James and Giant Peach. I know these aren't like got any problems with imitable techniques or anything, but still, I mean, makes you think.
No, it's a bit unusual there. We even see it to this day. Lego Movie 1 and 2, those were both used, but they're PGs. But yeah, that's probably one of the strangest ratings decisions I've seen in my lifetime. And I've seen some crazy shit in my years, but Toy Story, one of my all-time favorite films, as far as ratings are concerned, at least on a UK level, that's certainly a good talking point as far as imitable and dangerous behavior is concerned, which sort of can run the gamut, really. I know when people think of this sort of subject, they usually think of Jackass. Which, oh, God, I hate that fucking show. I don't know why
I never
people
liked
love
it
it so
myself.
much.
Yeah, I never really got into it, to be honest. I mean, all my friends seem to really love it, but it's like, oh Christ. I mean, like, yeah, it's a bunch of people dicking around. It's really not that funny.
Exactly that. I mean, Beavis and Butthead, that's funny and stupid, but Jackass is. I just don't get the appeal behind it, but the reason why it catches my interest is because it's an 18 certificate comedy, not necessarily because of sex or language, but because of dangerous stunts or crude dangerous stunts that they list on BBC Content Advice. I'm like, oh. Dirty Sanchez and CKY have this problem as well. They are some rather extreme, sort of weird docu-reality comedy shows where people just bash their heads in or get eaten in the testicles by crocodiles or put electricity up their anus. It's what kind of, I don't know how to say, but I know Dirty Sanchez is a Welsh product. And weirdly enough, the movie that they made based on the MTV show actually was censored in the US to get an R rating because there was too much nudity. So they blurred out all the penises, but they kept in all the dangerous stunts. I think one of the stunts also involves sight of a man getting a nail up his cock. Which, oh, no, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, enough said about that. That's some really. No, I mean, I remember one of the earliest. Not really experienced because obviously I wouldn't have had it. But of course, I told you I saw Terminator 2 at a very young age. I believe I've mentioned that to you once or twice.
Of course, and it traumatized you a little bit too.
Well, I was quite upset by the ending with Arnie's character's death, because it really is quite a tear-jerking ending. I mean, it's right up there with anything out of E.T. or the death of Optimus Prime or the death of Bam in a Transformers movie in '86 or a death of Bambi's mum and everything. But yeah, it is. It does really get you there. Pardon me, but the main issue I was because there's a scene where Sarah breaks out of her cell by picking the lock was cut out from the VHS version, at least anyway. I don't because it was considered imitable. In fact, Linda Hamilton did actually learn how to successfully pick a lock actually for that scene. So yeah, there's one example.
I was not made aware of that. My goodness, but
It was on the GNC episode.
Well, give me certainly another talking point for the future to come. But I guess because it's aimed at young people and they're going to see it and they didn't want some sort of juvenile delinquents who probably would go see a movie like that to get any ideas. It's probably the same reason why they clamped down on some of the sketches from CKY and Dirty Sanchez. And then also, I know Fast and Furious also got flagged, at least the first one did, because they thought that the aggressive, dangerous driving was probably a little too much to pass at even 12. Now it's re-rated 12A.
Well, yeah, they basically rated it 15 because they felt it glamorized street racing, which of course it was considered criminal activity. But to be honest, the later films they actually had someone come in and say, well, the kind of people that engage in freaking this sort of activity won't be obstructed by a 15 rating, so there's no point in rating it 15. So they decided Okay, well, the second film, after some cuts were made, was passed with a 12A rating, and now the first film has been downgraded to 12A, and yeah, that sounds all right. But also, there was the year before Fast and Furious was Gone in 60 Seconds, which, in spite of it being PG-13 in America, was not really rated 15 here, but had to be cut because of a scene where someone picks the lock of a car. So, I mean, yeah, make of that what you will.
So I've never seen that movie. I only just know the scene where Nicolas
It's not
Cage
all that.
listens to Lowrider by War. But yeah, that is kind of unusual, really. But because you look at it in perspective, the only time I've ever heard something like that happening was um, there was a video game called Wheelman. It was Vin Diesel, T for teen, but 15 in the UK, and that was listed for sort of criminal behavior, which I could only imagine has something to do with dangerous driving and also theft, hijacking, that sort of thing, which on face value seems a little bit silly, really, because there's a lot of films that were even past PG, even back in your parents' or your grandparents' generation, that had quite criminal type behavior going on. I mean, Italian Job was past A or PG because of those reasons. But most people sort of forget about that and they just remember the car chase with the minis.
Well, yeah. Guess I didn't really care too much about it back then for all the problems they did have. That wasn't, yeah, that probably wasn't something they cared too much about that then. I had something that went through my mind right there.
And then also Need for Speed and Burnout. I actually had Burnout Revenge and Burnout 1 on PlayStation 2 years ago. Burnout Revenge was a U certificate, but there was so much violent and aggressive car driving. I almost thought, should this be past 12 or PG at the least? I don't know. It just seemed a little bit out of place compared to another game that was about cars, but it wasn't quite as aggressive, called, you guessed it, Cars. Disney Pixar video game adaptation. So take that as you will. Actually, those are one of the two games. Those were the last games I ever owned on PS2. Weirdly enough, they were both U certificate. One of them was a lot more aggressive than the other. I don't know how you feel about that and stuff like Need for Speed.
I never really played many of those games. Well, I played Burnout a bit. Yeah, that was quite fun with the destruction and everything. But of course, I was already a grown up by the time these things were passed, so it didn't really make much odds to me. I was going to mention, in terms of IMITABLE, 'cause I just remembered the second Spider-Man film, Spider-Man 2, which is kind of redundant, self-explanatory. Even though the first one was given a 12 rating, which caused a lot of hoo-ha and did finally cause a BBFC to de-restrict a 12 rating. The second one, they once went for a PG, and while it was past PG, it was only passed after a cut was made, and of course, the cut was to a headbutt, which yeah, which is delivered early on in the film because it was considered imitable, and of course that's been a rather inconsistent thing I've found of attitude towards headbutts from the uh, BBFC because first of all, Matrix had some headbutts cut out, again 15 as opposed to an 18. Spider-Man 2 and Attack of the Clones had to have headbutts cut out to get a PG as opposed to a 12. And then there's freaking Triple X and Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, which had to have headbutts out to get a 12 as opposed to a 15. It's like, well, hang on a second. This doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, like Spider-Man 2 and Attack of the Clones could have had an uncut 12 with a headbutt, but Triple X and Charlie's Angels couldn't. Did that just seem remarkably inconsistent and just completely like for just making shit up as they go along to you?
I would agree with that. And this was even during the Robin Duvall days where there was a bit more consistency involved, but it does sound kind of ridiculous, really. Because one, a child, a lot of these films have shootings and guns anyway, so there's already violent, but to flag on a simple headbutt or sort of double clap in the throat, it sort of harkens back to the days of Furman with the nunchaku. You can't show certain martial arts techniques because it could be quite imitable or aggressive if you play it in the
Well,
schoolyard. So,
true, but at least we could say one could make the argument at least a headbutt or an ear clap or a throat chop is in itself quite at least it's something like any kid could do and everything. Whereas like fighting with guns, especially in this country where guns are almost impossible to come by. I mean, guns are so bloody restricted in this country, and gun violence is so rare that seeing people fighting with guns, they may as well be fighting with bloody magic wands and everything. And same with as with an nunchaku or the shuriken, again, same concept. It's not likely a 10-year-old kid's going to get your hands on those things, so it doesn't really matter if they see a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I suppose you could make the argument, I personally wouldn't, that headbutts and throat chops and ear claps probably are more or hitting someone over the head with a glass bottle or something like that is something that they'd be more likely to be able to do. Not that I think that they're going to be able to want to do it because they saw it on TV anyway, but well, you know the point I'm making.
no, actually, I do because it is. You can just use your fists or your foot just to attack your enemy. I mean, I've got into trouble a few times at school for punching the bullies, but ultimately got my way because they were terrorizing my friends. So I know a thing or two about sort of weird martial arts combat. And you didn't need to bring a gun to school just to sort someone out or a knife. Now, I'm surprised we didn't even mention this. Knives. It's a problem in the UK. I know America's got guns as the problem, but in Britain, knives generally tend to be our pick of poison. To where, unfortunately, there are certain neighbourhoods, particularly in London, like Tower Hamlets and Hackney and Haringey, that are stereotyped as having all these ethnic people with knives pulling out, saying, "I'm going to cut you, blood." Like, what? No, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why they generally tend to be a bit more picky about films that, let's say, 15, or sometimes 12, that just show people pulling off knives or making it seem like it's glamorized and cool to do. I mean, I had this problem a little bit with Kick-Ass, but the reason why I did, because it's shown a child using weapons. No 11 or 12-year-old should be wielding a knife and a shotgun like that. That's kind of dangerous and also makes me uncomfortable. But I know how we feel
Well,
about
again,
that movie. It's different.
Well, again, I think Kick-Ass is very fantastical in its nature, but also, like, again, guns are very in America, of course, guns are quite ubiquitous and prevalent. Fuck, I don't know.
Prolific. Prolific.
Well, anyhow, but in Britain, they're not. I mean, the best you can probably get is a hunting shotgun, which only freaking farms to have anyway. Again, a 10-year-old's not likely to get their hands on it. And of course, that reminds me, you brought up knives. Of course, yeah, Lara Croft Tomb Raider had to be edited down because of use of knives and everything, even though it's kind of ridiculous, seeing as it's only the bad guys ever used them. And it's certainly not I mean, it was edited down to get a 12 as opposed to a 15. Which is, of course, it looks kind of silly nowadays. Well, only 7 years later, Dark Knight came out, and the Joker was using knives quite flippantly. But of course, I mean, I watched the 2018 movie, and of course, that had some very brazen knife play in it and everything. And granted, used by bad guys and everything. I remember watching it at because that was possibly uncut with 12 a.m. I remember watching it thinking, my God, if that was released back when I was a teen, that would have to be toned the fuck down for a 12. So I mean, they have called on these sort of issues to the BBFC have been to their credit. I mean, there's also another film I'd like to reference right now, but it's not for knife play or anything. If in a few minutes, so we don't dwell too long on this particular issue. But yeah, I'll go back to you right now, Mark.
Oh, wait, what film is it again? Because it does cover the gamut, really. We can talk about, like, let's say, Well, if you're referencing suicide, I know it is quite a touchy subject, and that is
It's
one of
not
those.
suicide. It's not suicide, Mark. It's not suicide. Um, I'll tell you what it is. It's Zafura. Have you seen the film Zafura? What's it called? A space
Yeah, space is PG, but they had
space adventure.
cut it to avoid a 15.
Yeah. But he said like they had to cut down the scene where like the spaceman guy, whose name I can't remember, has poured petrol on a sofa before setting it on fire to get a PG, and it said an uncut 15 would have been available. It's like, oh, that's fucking brilliant, isn't it? A film that's clearly aimed at kids would have been past 15 in its uncut form, which would have not prevented anyone under 15 seeing it. It would have been the same category as what else came out in 2005? Flipping Blade Trinity, or was that 2004? I can't remember. 2005.
War of the
Can't
Worlds.
remember. Yeah, but I'm talking about 15 rated films.
Oh, sorry.
I can look it up. 2005 in film. I'm just Wikipedia right now, but for what good it's going to do.
Well, I know, for instance, like it would have been in the same category as something like The Grudge or The Ring. Yes, remakes of Japanese horror films were a thing.
But, that's true. But those films were rated PG-13 in America. I'm trying to think of R-rated films, so that makes the 15 a bit more well deserved. Oh, Sin City was an 18. Sorry, I have no fucking idea, to be honest. I am completely. Well, the Amityville Horror, that was a 15, I think.
Yes.
That came out that year.
Hostel. I think.
Saw came out, but yeah, Saw 2 came out, but again, that was an 18, so we can't really use that one. Oh, Kingdom of Heaven, that'll do. Yeah, we're in the same category as Kingdom of Heaven. It was like, what the fuck? But also, I mean, also that I think it's a Disney or a Pixar, one of those stuff. Have you seen a B movie?
I have. I've got it on DVD. Weirdly enough, they had to cut that because it showed someone using an aerosol can to light a fire, which, that's yet another case of them being a little bit too nanny state.
Yeah, I mean, it was good that around the time they'd like abandoned all the Furman-esque stuff of nunchucks, and we're not banning anything in total. But Jesus Christ, clamping down on shit like that was a little bit too zealous. Of course, I was already an adult at this point, so the kind of films that I would be going to see would not really be affected so heavily by these issues. But still, I mean, it does seem a little bit silly. I mean, it couldn't have been easy being a kid growing up in this time. Later, don't wait. Movie game when?
07. I mean, I was a teenager when it came out. I've seen a lot stronger stuff than fucking B movie.
The BBFC website says an uncut classification was not available to the distributor, probably because, I mean, they figured that if it was uncut, it'd probably be rated 15, which to their minds would be unacceptable for a movie like that. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that's so fucking ridiculous. You could probably watch it uncut online anyway, so.
Or you could get like another region 2 copy, like the French or the German one, bring it through UK shores. You won't get criminally prosecuted for it, but yeah, it is a bit silly, really. But then again, they did that with Lilo and Stitch, which I know a lot of people love, particularly us millennials, because it's showing a girl being stuck inside a fridge, but they changed it to a pizza box, so it didn't look like it was more imitable. Rocket Man. Not the Elton John movie, but the Disney movie about the kooky astronaut. They had to censor that because it's showing a child in a washing machine, which, yes, if you do that, can be very dangerous. And Ren and Stimpy was flagged for showing a hanging. Pod episodes for Slow West, I think, or Go West. And that sort of musical number went for about 3 minutes or so, and they had to pretty much just cut the whole thing out. Paranoia Agent, which is an anime, that got an 18, but still had to be cut for showing a suicide or attempted hanging, and it was played for laughs in the dark comedic version, but still, eh, it's just bizarre, really. I don't quite understand them sometimes when it comes to particularly their policy on
And of course, Lilo and
hanging and
Stitch is
suicide.
like on. Yeah, Lilo and Stitch is now on frickin' Disney Plus, which of course the BBFC has no control over. So yeah, you can watch it being completely uncut there.
Exactly. But I think most of the children you're going to be watching it aren't going to quite pick up on, oh, I want to go in the fridge too. It most likely just be, copying the bits where Stitch is like, wow, wow, wow.
I mean, yeah, there was an episode of, while we're talking about suicide thing, there was an episode, American Horror Story. I think it was the very first episode, which on even though it aired completely uncut on TV before, the on DVD release there was a bit where this young girl is self-harming on her forearm and everything, and the guy gives her this other guy gives her some advice on how to do it better, and he says that, and basically he tells, and then basically comes up with a phrase, they won't be able to stitch that up, and of course apparently that was cut out of the they decided to cut that out of uh the DVD release, even though it was rated 18. It's like, that is ridiculously heavy-handed, especially considering you then go watch it online or streaming. Again, it's completely left in because again the BBC just doesn't have any jurisdiction.
No, I wondered the same thing too. Because I've never seen American Horror Story, but I'll take your word for it. I just thought, because I live by the rule that unless sort of overt illegal activity or snuff film is involved, don't cut anything at 18. That, in my opinion, was probably them being, yes, again, too overzealous, like you said. But they tried doing this, not on a BBFC level, but they tried doing this with 13 Reasons Why, which is a TV show on Netflix that unfortunately depicts graphic scenes of teen suicide. And it was flagged amongst parental groups and councils saying that it seems like it's glamorizing and making it look sexy, which suicide is not sexy, but Netflix doesn't really censor or cut stuff unless they are required to by law, like in Turkey or India, where you have to comply with the government on a lot of these sort of things. But I just found that a little bit unusual. They also tried clamping down on the smoking in Stranger Things as well. I'm like,
That's
oh,
that is just, yeah. You can't always. I mean,
uh,
I don't really know what to say to that. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid. I mean, yeah. What can you? I mean, what you gonna do? Some people are just fucking dumb, and it's just so ridiculous and silly. And I don't know I really don't know what to make of it.
well, it depends on the audience we're talking to, because we're both millennial men of a certain age who don't have any children or a wife. Not to sound rude, but if you have children and you're a parent, particularly a mother, you're going to be concerned about a lot of things that your child's being exposed to. My mother was like that more so than my father. And, speaking as someone who's had issues with suicidal thinking and self harm, I'm sorry to be quite open with this because I said this on the 12A podcast. Removing depictions of that sort of thing, particularly if the context of the work involved is to show why are people doing this because of poverty or broken relationships or dysfunctional family or homophobia, only destroys or dilutes the message. You sometimes have to show explicit scenes just to kind of get the point across and get people talking. And I think when they tampered with 13 Reasons Why, I just thought, oh, here we go. But thankfully, they didn't do that with the documentary The Bridge, which was mentioned on BBC Podcast at one point about sort of extreme reality, that was deemed a higher end 18, even though it got a simple R rating for disturbing images of suicide and some language because it's shown explicit photos and shots of people jumping off San Francisco's Golden Gate into the river or the body of water. It's not a pleasant film to watch, but everything context-wise, I'm glad that film exists. But then again, with them being strict on that, and that was uncut, they were strict on the movie Soulmates, which had wrist cutting. They threatened to ban it, and then they had to cut the scenes out, and that got a 15, despite having this, which I just thought was really bizarre. And they tried doing some sort of weird damage control on the film Aus der Mitte, which is German, that had a scene where you see a woman's wrist bloody, which implies she was trying to slit herself in a bathtub. And that was past 18 just because of that one scene. Smile had the same problem too, showing throat slitting by self. 18.
Oh yeah, that's why. I always thought maybe it's a bit bloody, but I suppose it's not that bloody and everything. I mean, most other countries never gave it so high a rating.
Well, it is quite a graphic scene because you see a lot of blood sort of gushing out of her throat, and there probably would have been a point where even the US would have passed a film like this NC-17 had they, unless they trimmed it. But I'm glad they gave it an R uncut. But they usually can be a bit finicky, at least the MPAA, depending on the context of throat slittings, especially if they're quite bloody and sustained. But yeah, it's a bit ridiculous, really, on the policy on self-harm and suicide. Speaking as someone who's had issues with that in my life, even to this day,
I
they
wouldn't
need
mind
to
if they
chill on
did.
it.
I wouldn't mind if they, yeah, well, they do. I mean, like I say, it is a bit bloody with what is it, that Laura Weaver character at the beginning kills herself through cuts her throat, but it's not that. I think it is the suicide elements that probably caused the BBFC to give it an 18 because yeah, it's really not. Well, it says strong bloody violence on their website, but I mean, it doesn't really seem that strong. I mean, I would have thought. You say you're glad he passed the uncut R. I'd prefer to actually probably did give it NC-17 because at least it makes it seem like the 18 is more justified.
Well, we've talked on that previously before, but I think we've got differing opinions. But at the same time, as they were strict on those, they weren't strict on Wrist Cutters, a love story, which got a 15 despite having an overt suicide theme and Coriolanus based on the Shakespeare play, but they made it more sort of action thriller. That had a scene where a man slits his wrist and it's quite bloody, a little sustained. And even for that aspect, on the lower end, The Artist, I love that movie. It's a black and white silent film from France that won Best Picture. That had a scene where you see a man put a gun in his mouth, and it's quite sustained. And it looks as though he was almost going to achieve that goal. It was quite embarrassing to watch that scene in front of my mother because of those experiences I've had. And she said, "You can watch." And that's a PG film. And then A Man Called Over, which they remade as A Man Called Otto from Sweden, that had a lot of scenes of attempted suicide, but they passed that at 15 as well. There were some scenes that are quite disturbing and upsetting to watch, but I guess because it's a foreign film, they might have been a little bit relaxed about it. So I'm just ranting off on here.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably just that we figured kids probably weren't on a lining up to go see it. They probably just didn't think it was probably a bigger deal. But I mean, yeah, I don't know, to be honest.
Loving Vincent, that was a 12A. I'm sorry I know all these titles. Yes, I've got issues. That was 12A. That was animated, but it was for children. That was about Vincent van Gogh, who cut his ear off and shot himself in the field of flowers. And, on the surface, it is quite grim, but it's done in a way that's kind of.
That probably had better context behind it, though. So I mean, I'm just thinking that probably a better context, so they probably understood that it was okay. But I remember just one other thing that suddenly came to my mind. There was that show on Netflix called Camp Cretaceous, which is basically an animated spin-off from a Jurassic Park or Jurassic World series, and they've had about 4 seasons. I think it's 4 seasons. Yeah, I'm just getting. Sorry, I'm just looking up right now. I mean, I did watch them. Yeah, from 20. It's only lasted for 2 years. Yeah, 50 episodes. Oh, 6 seasons of it. And I think like the vast majority of them were like rated. Yeah, were rated. Oh, my mistake. Just five. My mistake. Yeah, they had 5 seasons of it, and seasons 1 through to seasons 4 are all rated PG because, well, that's just what things tend to be rated nowadays if they're not too overly kiddish and everything. But season 5 was up to a 12, and because, well, and the reason for it was, at least that Netflix gave, was dangerous behavior. Granted, I'm not too sure what dangerous behavior was. I did watch it, but I think my memory might be drawing a blank here. But yeah, it just seems like really, it's so it's kind of imitable techniques of dangerous behavior is really vague and hard to define and almost quite amorphous, really. I mean, it just seems sort of bizarre and odd that you just make all these, that you just come down so hard on something just for the on the basis of like, well, again, like I said, dangerous behavior or imitable techniques. Just kind of bizarre.
I would presume so too, but there was a film called The Tree of Life. My grandmother loves it. That had got a 12/8 for just one scene of a child playing with electricity. Yes, it's dangerous, but for a film that gentle and that tame, it could have been a PG. It could have been a U even. It probably would have been under days of Furman or Stephen Murphy, but it's a bit ridiculous.
Well, maybe.
Well,
I mean, Problem Child 2 was cut to get a PG, and so was The Witches. And actually, no, wait. I think The Witches was toned down because of some sort of because of the horror elements. I'm just going to check it out right now.
I know there's some transformation scenes in that one that were quite disturbing for younger children. I haven't seen that movie, but I should because it's based on Roald Dahl.
Yeah, it wasn't doing imitable techniques.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. But for Problem Child, it probably is a result of imitable behavior. I mean, it's like Dennis the Menace. He's a little terror who likes throwing stones at people with his whip thingy. It's Bart Simpson uses it. He's like a modern day Dennis the Menace.
True.
And there was an episode where I think it was past.
Although to be fair, Mark, when you say Dennis the Menace, that means a different character over here in Britain.
Well, I'm not thinking of Dennis and Nash. I'm thinking of Dennis.
Yeah, the blonde Dennis with the blonde Dennis. Yeah, we just call him Dennis over
here. my bad.
Yeah, but it's all right. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm looking at the alternate versions of Problem Child 2 on IMDb as we speak. Yeah, it says here, initial UK releases were cut for a PG rating, theatrical by 24 seconds, video by 1 minute 10 seconds. The video cuts were as follows. At 7 minutes, in gas barbecue grill scene, after sight of propane gas cylinders, remove all sight of boy's hand turning on gas valve of their man reaching for matches under grid, resuming on to see actual blast. 35.5 minutes. In doormat electrocution sequence, now this is actually quite a funny scene actually. Remove sight of mat being moved under tap water and made wet in sink, and all later shots of puddle outside on doormats remove instructive detail that links water and electricity. Intercut footage of bell rewiring may remain. 41 minutes. After elderly man pulls out his belt, remove all sight of boy twirling chain sticks. Resuming on manga. That was just to do with Furman's nunchucks things. All cuts were weighed in 2006. But yeah, there we well, did you get all that?
I did. I couldn't help but laugh at it, really, because if it is PG, it does give away that it's not really suitable for the youngest children who might copy it. But at the same time, it's a little bit ridiculous because Britain is also known for Horrid Henry and Rotten Ralph. I know some people could get those two confused, but those were two cartoons I remember growing up that were, featured characters, child characters that were quite naughty and rebellious, who would get away with kind of really bad behavior, and those were youth certificates. So then the flag on problem child, and probably Dennis, it's probably maybe a case of, oh, it's American, so we don't trust it really. No, that's just
When you
me
say Dennis,
ranting. I'm talking about
uh,
blonde Dennis with
yeah,
the.
I know what you mean. I mean, are you were you referring to the movie? I don't think that was out. I think that was cut.
Yes,
Uh,
movie or cartoon. It's been a long time, but I would
it's o
presume.
it's okay, mate. I mean, yeah. Apparently, have you seen the film Mr. Nanny as well with Hulk Hogan in?
I have never heard of that.
It's
Uh,
one of those types of
it's like,
kindergarten cop style clones where like they take a muscle bound guy who's known for his macho action roles, in this case a wrestler type, and puts him in a sort of daycare child minding uh, scenario where he gets basically given a runaround by a bunch of little tykes. Mm, and well, that anyhow, yeah, there's a Or yeah, alternative versions by on IMDb. Although the cinema version for was intact, the 1993 UK video was cut by 18 seconds by the BBFC to re-edit a scene where Armstrong, not Hulk Hogan's character, is electrocuted by the children while taking a shower. So again, it just reminded me of the Problem Child 2 cuts. Reminded me of that one.
oh no, there's definitely similarities there. No, that actually sounds kind of funny on the surface, but I guess given the times, they had to be zealous because they were still accountable to a Tory government and also Video Nasties Panic and the VRA, Video Recordings Act. So
It was so stupid. It was such an embarrassing time to be alive.
well, I mean, I was on the sort of tail end of things. You had to see it in your childhood and teenage years, so there's
I
that.
just, I just grew up knowing that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was banned, and just like we just accepted it. It's like fucking hell, man. But that's off topic, so let's not get into it.
Well, you did say Chainsaw, which reminds me, the Three Stooges movie that came out about 10, 11 years ago. That was a
Oh yeah,
PG, but they had to remove quite a bit just to avoid a 12. I mean, they would get 12 on DVD and home media, but still. So I've seen the film uncut in the US, and some of the scenes that I was told that they had to censor, and then seeing it in the US uncut version, it still didn't remove much of the impact because there was a scene where a chainsaw was being put onto the fat one's head, and it was like, oh, that was a bit nasty. And then someone gets a microwave smashed in their head, and it looks like their eyes are bugging out, which I presume was probably that one thing pushed them a little too far, but still, it was both a
I mean,
mix of.
again, I'm looking at the alternate versions on IMDb. There's no mention of a chainsaw. There's a microwave I mentioned, verbal reference to playing with matches, hair tongs used on a woman's tongue, cheese grater, I think you might have mentioned, used on a man's foot, and a vegetable peeler used on a man's head. Yeah, uncut version was rated 12 on video. I just suddenly know. I did just suddenly think of that as myself because I knew the nostalgia critic reviewed it recently. To make of that what you will.
I mean, it's a funny movie. It's the same people who did Me, Myself, and Irene and Green Book. But it's very sort of Mr. Bean, Johnny English type humor, which sort of appeals to everyone, but people would find it kind of juvenile. But it depends on what type of generation you're talking to.
Sorry. Yeah, I've not seen it. The critics don't seem to like it too much, but I think they never do. Yeah, I mean, that was, like I said, I don't really have much comment to really make on that. I'm just going. I am really. I know I say this all the time, but I am really spitballing with this one, just thinking of what I can.
Hey, that's nothing wrong with that, though. I mean, it's a bit of a touchy subject 'cause we dealt with suicide and hanging, and then we dealt with ones that are just kind of silly, really, because someone plays with matches or fireworks. Now, I know there was a film called Deck the Halls. That was PG, Christmas movie, and that was given it
Yeah.
mostly because of the language. I think it's some sexual humor, but they didn't list on the consumer advice fireworks misuse. And I would have thought that was the reason why that film would have been a PG at best, because it shows people sort of playing with. It can be quite dangerous. Some people get their hands and fingers blown off from using fireworks in a bad manner. So, quite scary stuff.
According to IMDb, it's been a PG on both sides of the Atlantic and on both sides of the equator, because there's Australia where it was as well.
Oh,
I just know about Deck for Halls because, along with Christmas and Cranks, it's considered those are considered the two shittest ever Christmas movies.
I actually like Christmas with the Cranks, but over the years, because I know what Tim Allen's politics are, it's not quite the same for me. And I'm speaking as a Toy Story fan, so a bit hypocritical there.
I mean, that's okay. I mean, I don't really think much. Never thought much of Tim Allen anyway. I never found him to be a particularly funny guy.
He's very vanilla.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be that I have very, very low opinions of a lot of American comedians and everything, apart from the really good ones. But yeah, I mean, I've read reviews for I've heard every online critic basically tear both those movies apart. So I think I know what we need to know.
In the UK, we have a history of doing public information films and adverts that warn about misuse of electrical products and fireworks or alcohol and that sort of thing. And yes, it can be quite dangerous, but the PIFs and PSAs generally tend to be more disturbing than the film itself. I've had more nightmares seeing ads for child abuse and road safety than I ever had with any horror film, except probably for Splice and Elfin Lead. But that's another story. Now, have we talked about solvent abuse? Because there's been a few films in recent years that have got an 18 automatically just for showing people sniffing glue or paint thinners. And then The Silent Twins, which had Letitia Wright from Black Panther, that was given it because of glue sniffing. I'm like, of all the things, rape scenes or violence, you flag on glue sniffing. I guess because it's easy to get. You can't get cocaine that easily or cannabis, but you can certainly get glue from your local office supply store to work on your arts projects. And some people, they might like the smell. I knew one girl who was very attractive back when I was at secondary school, when I was doing my GCSEs, and she used to like sniffing it herself. And I was like, no, thank you.
Say your film was called Stray, you say?
Yep. Just Stray, not Strays.
I did figure. When did it come out?
Oh, 2 years ago.
2020. Oh, 2020.
Yes.
Yeah, I just found it on IMDb. It's about stray dogs.
Yeah, in Turkey, and it got like an age 0 in Germany, and I was like, wow, that's a big leap. 0 to 18.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up as we speak right now. I mean, yeah, that's fucking weird, man. I mean, seriously, they give a film like that.
And there's really nothing really in it that's too offensive. Maybe just some language, but that's it. I just think that's quite bizarre. It's like Waltz with Bashir getting an 18 because it shows a brief cartoon sex scene, or Garage because it shows a VHS tape of something quite pornographic, but it was so brief. And the movie was quite gentle. It seemed like it was a bit harsh the way BBFC treated it. I know I'm sounding a
Yeah.
little bit like Rob here, but take that as you will. Compared to in '03, there was a film called Love Lisa, which had Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's already had problems with drug abuse because he's a bit of a junkie, which means heroin. But in this movie, he huffs petrol pretty much almost throughout the entire movie. And that got a 15 uncut, even though the BBFC generally tends to be quite strict about solvent abuse. But I guess in this case, they kind of slipped past it.
Mm-hmm.
Samson and Delilah
Yeah.
was Australian. That had people sniffing petrol. But that was a movie about poverty in Aboriginal communities. So sorry,
Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just looking it up. Sorry. I'm just looking up the film Garage on IMDb. I mean, that does. Jesus Christ. It's times like that you wonder if you can take the BBFC seriously because they're just so fucking ridiculous.
absolutely. Well, just on this instance, they were way too harsh on Garage. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite films from Ireland. But
What's it even about?
well, I'll put it this way: it's about a lonely man who is maybe a little bit mentally stunted, but he tries to just go about his business. He works with this young lad at a petrol station in rural Ireland. Without giving too many spoilers, he does get into trouble later in the film, and it leads to his downfall. It's a pretty much a sort of tragic comedy about a man who doesn't quite fit in, but he tries to, but ultimately fails. I can relate to it on a lot of levels because I am kind of a loner and a bit weird to people, like Pat Short's character named Josie. If you do check it out, it's available at your local DVD stores by Soda Pictures. You can't find it on streaming. It's very rare to find. Anyways, but yeah. And have you heard of also the movie Swallow? It got an 18 certificate because it shows someone eating pins and batteries. Wow.
I have not heard of that one before. Again, I've not heard of a lot of these films you keep bringing up. And again, I remember you have rather eclectic tastes in these sort of in these movies. Mind you, we're given 18 in Spain. Not that that's as bad as it is here anyway, because Spanish age ratings are purely advisory. So what was I going with that? No, but yeah, so I've not heard of many of these films before, so I really can't comment too much. It does seem that you start to bring them to my attention. Really does sort of show just how just heavy-handed they can be.
Well,
Oh, it says on the BBFC website. It says scenes of self-harm. It's like fucking hell, man.
well, I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's such an unusual ratings issue because it's not sex, it's not violence, it's a bit hard to sort of pinpoint, really. It's not even drug use like you would get with solvent abuse. It's just watching a person eating batteries and pins, that sort of thing. She's got mental health issues and she's suffered sexual abuse. My friend loves this film, by the way. We've done the NC-17 podcast with him, and
Yeah, I remember
I was
the guy.
asking about that, and that's kind of a strange movie to sort of bring up when you talk to people. Swallow. I've never seen it, but I probably should, just to see why it got an 18. Because sometimes what piques my curiosity a little bit, especially when you get films that are like 18, or if they're animated or something, there's one little issue that they pushed it a little too far, and they gave it a higher rating or told it you had to be cut or banned. That's one of those kind of movies. Also, if it's a movie that deals with people who are kind of lonely or sort of not quite there in their head, I can sort of relate to it for obvious reasons. That's why I did this podcast, on some level, because it's kind of what's the word? Cathartic? I don't know if it's the right one, but take it as you will. And this is going to be a very controversial thing I'm going to be saying, probably more so than the pornography one. When your life gets so bad you have nowhere to turn to, sometimes taking the bullet on yourself is probably the only way you're going to find peace. The Japanese honor system sort of buys into that sort of philosophy, and I still stick by that. I haven't done it myself, but if the war comes and I'm so poor and I go to prison or whatever, then I guess I will have to off myself just to save everyone else. It's why, you get films about people who go into the light and kill themselves so they can then protect others who are in danger. I think I Am Legend has that moment, or one of those films. In America, a film like that probably would just get an R rating, no problem. They don't really crack down on suicide scenes, except for, I think one film comes to mind. It's called The Rules of Attraction, based on Bret Easton Ellis, who done American Psycho, and that had some pretty graphic scenes of arms being slit or suicidal behavior. And they even said you had to trim a little bit of that just to get an R rating. Aside with the chief issues, sex scenes, I thought that's the first time I've ever heard something like that being flagged, because MPA doesn't really seem to crack down on scenes of suicide or self-harm as much as the UK does. Then again, the artist was given a PG-13 because of the disturbing image and a rude gesture. And that scene deeply upset me, and I love that movie where we see a guy put a gun in his mouth.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just remember Rules of Attraction. I did see that scene, but a few when I was at uni, I was watching the scene. Oh yeah, that's that one suicide scene. I was actually made me feel a little bit. Did make me feel a little bit icky watching it, because that sort of method of suicide, which I won't repeat, always just unnerves me a little bit. I mean, I don't like. I mean, obviously, suicide isn't something I'm too keen on anyway. But that method just looks really horrible. I always thought if you're gonna commit suicide, can't you do it a different way? Yeah, it says that the original ratings about Lionsgate received from the MPAA was an NC-17, but director Robert J. Avery made some cuts and received an R rating. Unrated version may be released outside the US and on DVD. I mean, I fucking no idea, but I mean.
Well, they probably cracked on it more than other films that have such material because it's independent. And also there's the sexual stuff that was going on, and that obviously we know the MPA doesn't like that sort of stuff. But aren't very many countries. What?
Yeah. No, carry on. Aren't many countries who what?
Who flag on suicide and dangerous behavior as much as the UK does. I don't think even Germany gives that much of a shit, because they could pass a film like that 16, 7 Jahren. I think Australia, no, actually they did flag. Whisk Cutters, a love story, was past R18, not 15 like it was in the UK.
I heard that Australia demanded cuts as well. So yeah, I mean that's kind of was at least that. I'm just looking at the what's it? What am I talking about? The alternate versions on IMDb again. As you can see, I get a lot of my information from this website.
I do too.
Australian releases of the film are uncut and retain a 22-second. Oh no, it was completely uncut in Australia. Sorry, my mistake. But yeah, I mean.
But I'd just like to say, Rob, I don't know if you have any last-minute thoughts on this subject of imitable and dangerous content?
Not a huge amount, but I will say if you do see people on the TV or screen doing dangerous behavior, don't copy it. If you think it's a good idea to copy it, you're a fucking moron. And actually, if you do it and you die, it's actually just natural selection. You're filling out the herd, and yeah, yeah. So maybe it's a good thing. But no, don't do shit like that because, well, we don't want people dying due to blatant Darwin wards. So yeah, please don't copy things you see on TV. All you do is just give these censors more excuses to be cunts.
Well,
over to you, Mark.
You just reminded me of something. I'm so sorry I forgot about all this. You know when you've been tangoed. You remember that ad where kids were trying to copy smacking people's heads in?
Yes, I remember that stuff.
Oh, but that is exactly a case of what you're talking about, where kids thought, hey, it's funny, let's go smack people's heads in at random. And I think they banned it from air, got so many complaints from the ITC, and they said, no, we're drawing the line on this here, or you have to like air it after the watershed. But yeah, that was one that wasn't received very well. As well as there was another ad which showed people spitting, and this was played for laughs, but I guess in polite dinner table conversation, you don't want to be spitting Fanta out in the open like you're at a Wild West tavern or something like that. I'm going to spit my tobacco. So yeah. All right. I think we've ran our course really. I'd like to give a final thought to everyone who is listening. Thank you very kindly for listening to all these episodes, or some of them. Please do not send us in a sort of prison for some of the stuff that we've been saying or some of the films that we have watched. We have pre-vetted and we made it legal, and it's context-based. So don't even try it. But over the offside, thank you very kindly for watching all these videos and content that we have to offer. Maybe we might come with something out in the future. You never know. But for the time being, I think me and Rob here will part our separate ways and do whatever else we have to do. And if something comes up, you'll be the first to know. Thank you very kindly for standing by these past year and a half watching BSC v MPAA.
It's been a blast, and I've been glad to be here. And yeah, well, good luck with whatever you do beyond this point, Mark.
Absolutely, there might be a series 2, but don't hold your feet to the fire on it too much. Ta-ra.